That fish smell. Oh, you can never seem to wash it out.
I'd never played a Bethesda RPG until now. It's a pile of chat. That's a creature pile. That's the turd from Jurassic Park. Whether you believe it's a giant pile of creature dung, a shining beacon of light in the dankness of modern AAA gaming, or a killer of half-baked, unfinished, eternal alpha games of legend, Starfield promised to be one of the most iconic games of the decade. So it's understandable then that the fear of missing out was real, and this time I wasn't going to just let this game fly by. You see, for the most part, I'm a multiplayer gamer. I crave player interactions of all kinds, and the type of challenge only human opponents can provide. Particularly in the last few years, I've mostly avoided single-player games, and when someone recommends I go play one, I usually respond with something like, "Oh wow, sounds great. Yeah, I'll check that out sometime." But I never do.
Having fun?
It was time to move out of first base and properly get my Bethesda cherry popped.
Be cut out for it. Takes skill, precision, and a willingness to risk your life.
This was it, a sci-fi game from Bethesda that had the sci-fi gaming community gripped by the balls, ready to rip and tear in any direction it pleased. Players were hanging on Todd's every word.
One of our industry's greatest creators, Todd Howard, everybody.
The hype machine was fully operational. I'd been sucked in. I wanted to really like Starfield. I wanted it to consume me like I'd been told it would, but my expectations were being carefully managed. The most I'd played of a Bethesda game was however long it took to see your first dragon in Skyrim back in 2011. Would Starfield grip me as I hoped it would? Well, the character creation was definitely a pleasant surprise. I spent way longer than I expected making my Colonel Quaritch-inspired middle-aged tough guy, which was a pleasant surprise right out the gate.
Pandora will shit you out dead with zero warning.
My plan was to make an ex-military beast-hunting introvert tainted by an encounter with an alien who left him scarred and infected with alien DNA. He'd eventually embark on a quest to hunt and kill as many aliens as he possibly could to make himself feel better about the third testicle that had appeared since the alien DNA took hold. This character also shares some similarities with the eventual backstory of my final Star Citizen character too, but I digress. I was certain the sheer scope of Bethesda's writing was one of its standout features in any of its previous titles. So I started out, much to the detriment of my Twitch channel, working on the main questline. I figured this would be a good introduction to Bethesda's style and the game itself. Don't worry though, I won't be discussing the main quest in much detail, because so far it's actually quite shit. There's just something a little mundane about it. The Constellation group, your preppy, campy group of artifact hunters, didn't really resonate with me and my character's vibe or what I wanted to do in the game.
It's party time. Get zoned and have fun.
So after following through with a couple of their quests, while desperately trying to get rid of the annoyance of useless companions such as Sarah and fending off awkward interruptions by my adoring fan Freak. Oh god, he's here. Oh no.
By Vectera, by Vectera, by Vectera! Is it you? Is it really, really you?
Why did I select this bloody trait? Oh yeah. It was instead time to deviate and embrace chaos and hopefully break this initial lukewarm feeling I had about the game by exploring some of the gazillion side quests and missions relentlessly offered to you as you move through the game.
Got some work for you if you're interested.
We've been trying to contact you about your ship's extended warranty.
Well, that's real damn helpful. Thank you.
As a Bethesda noob and just, well, me personally, this barrage of content initially felt very overwhelming. I mean, I'm just not used to so much f***ing content in my space games. I found the best way to keep myself on track and centered was to constantly refer back to the imaginary lack of moralities and direction of my gritty, slightly unhinged, middle-aged badman who's constantly on the verge of going postal due to a history of bad back problems and extended spaceflight-induced hemorrhoids. I actually googled this before I wrote the joke because I wasn't even sure spaceflight could induce hemorrhoids, but turns out it does, and it makes sense. So in order to stay less overwhelmed, I also found myself routinely referring back to the safety of what I call housekeeping by selling copious amounts of loot collected in any given session and carefully balancing it all between my character and my ship's small cargo hold. This has quickly sort of become my comfort place, allowing me to reset and find my bearings before embarking on the next mission. Fawning over loot, my precious. Sorting and selling junk while watching my credits rise, which reminds me, I really need to increase my cargo capacity to make this whole thing easier. Ah yes, that's better. The shipbuilding in this game is really good. Once you sit down and properly get into it, learn a few hotkeys and understand how the components work with one another, it really becomes addictive with little in the way of limits. Just look at what's been made so far. So for me and grumpy tough guy Hemorrhoid Man, deviating from the main quest meant looking for simple jobs that involved some muscle, or just exploring parts of the galaxy by landing at random locations on a planet and seeing what I could find. And honestly, this did impress me. After landing in the middle of nowhere on Bessel 3, I was immediately greeted with a pretty content-rich play area. Abandoned outposts, NPC ship landings, available side missions, lone traders, and abandoned mines. At another landing zone, I found this cool outpost filled with spacers and tons of loot, which genuinely feels like you're exploring something new while getting rewarded for it too. Coming across small pieces of lore which help explain the content you've stumbled upon, help legitimize and immerse you in the procedurally generated content. Maybe it's just that new game sheen, early days, as Chris Roberts would say, but it feels like there is a vast universe out there in Starfield, and so far, I've only scratched the surface. I've not even touched the outpost building yet, or fulfilled my character's desire to rid the galaxy of aliens, while a whole bunch of exciting faction and side quests still await me. While playing, it's hard to deny the game's ability to quickly immerse you in its world. The attention to detail is superb, with carefully placed items, ornaments, and details everywhere you go to make places feel lived in and part of the world they inhabit. Loot is so well placed, you really need to rummage through every nook and cranny to find useful stuff, which I really like. I've barely found any of the good, unique items like magazines, which offer character buffs and stat changes. The sound design in the game's soundtrack is some of the best I've heard in years. Thanks to Bethesda and the Premium Edition, I have access to the whole library of music. One of the things I love most about Star Citizen is Pedro Camacho's incredible compositions, and Starfield hits those same notes. That spot in my brain when I hear the music that says it's adventure time. I really rate immersion as an important factor when it comes to gaming, because for me, a large part of gaming is about escapism, which so far Starfield has provided. It's easy to blow time in the game. While I've barely scratched the surface, and in comparison to some of my community members, I have much less time played, the hours really do fly by, and that's because there's simply so much to do, outside of the abundance of quests and adventures offered to you in any given session. Coming from my beloved aforementioned half-baked unfinished Eternal Alpha game Star Citizen, which features no loading screens in a gigantic seamless universe, I really expected Starfield's loading screens to be a big problem. But they're not really. The pacing and quickness to the loading screens themselves just helps keep the gameplay experience snappy, with content and things to do constantly thrown at you. After years of climbing ladders, running through entire cities, riding elevators to get where I need to go in Star Citizen, I've really enjoyed being able to port back to my ship, straight into the cockpit, and watch my ship fly off-world in an awesome cinematic scene that allows me to just sit back and take it all in. This obviously works in Starfield's case. It's a single-player game where, for the most part, its abundance of gameplay is carefully curated for you, and the devs want you to experience it all in the most convenient way possible. Mostly. I mean, look at this inventory UI. I know there's mods, but this is just... Anyway, There is something to be said for the amount of gameplay and content you can enjoy in such a short time versus the likes of Star Citizen, which does provide ample room and opportunity for emergent player-driven content instead, which is obviously amazing and has its own drawbacks and virtues. Starfield has felt challenging enough to keep me hooked so far, and it's been a nice change of pace sharing the experience of Starfield with everyone vicariously on the internet. When I play a single-player game, I like to play it on the hardest mode available. In Starfield, this meant I'd been playing on very hard from the beginning, which actually made the game much less fun than I expected.
That fun, huh?
It was a slog, and combined with what initially feels like clunky movement and gunplay, NPCs were huge bullet sponges. I was constantly out of ammo, and useful loot was hard to come by. I opted to leave companions back at the ship, mostly because I found them annoying, but also unpredictable and mostly useless. I couldn't even bear to have them with me as pack mules, which is about the only thing they're good for.
Oh! You accidentally hit me!
After dropping the difficulty back down to hard, this seemed to provide a better balance in pace and difficulty overall, with particularly tough parts of the game prompting you to explore, find better loot, and level up before returning and trying again. Overall, this provided a better sense of progression, allowing me to actually move forward and enjoy my encounters in the game. With the newly rediscovered single-player option of save scumming before any difficult choices or encounters, enjoyment levels began to rise again. Am I becoming soft? I've been surprised at how much I've enjoyed Starfield, but it isn't without its problems. The NPC dialogue choices I'd heard so much about often lack options to respond in ways that feel right to you, or at least provide no or little alternative outcomes.
Hey there.
Please state the nature of your medical emergency.
Don't worry, Doc Man.
The barrage of NPC audio while you accidentally overhear multiple quest givers at once is annoying and immersion breaking, and obviously an unintentional overlap, but testament to the amount of content Bethesda has tried to squeeze into Starfield. And like moving the mouse around and stuff feels a bit like you're drunk. Like, you know, you can tell it's made for a controller. The gunplay and movement during combat initially felt a little weak and clunky, and as someone who plans on going melee boxing later down the line, I hate that there's no way to equip your fists without opening your inventory and fully unequipping your weapon first. Something I'm surprised I enjoy is the ability to survey planets. There's this addictive gotta catch 'em all feeling to it, but after running around with the scanner for a long period of time and brainlessly approaching everything that glows to spam E in order to scan it, it gets tedious quite quickly. I've been lucky so far and have barely encountered any bugs that I was told would be rampant throughout Starfield. And while the inventory system is less than stellar, I've yet to reach for any mods. I'm just not that bothered yet, and I guess I wanted to complete this review on a vanilla version of the game as the devs intended. This is the first expansive single-player game in years that's actually managed to hold my attention longer than a week or so, and I hope it can continue to hold my interest throughout its life cycle. I've still got so much to do in the game, and I look forward to exploring mods further down the line. The prospect of a full Star Wars conversion mod, for example, is exciting, and I still want to create the USS Defiant in the game's shipbuilder. So, as a primarily multiplayer gamer and hardy Star Citizen enjoyer, I no longer consider myself a Bethesda RPG virgin. I'm pleased to say Starfield has managed to capture my attention, so I'll probably check out some of Bethesda's other iconic single-player games like Fallout. And if you were paying attention to the early part of my review, you'll know that's a complete lie, but I certainly have a newfound respect for what Bethesda does with its games, and I can finally see why people hold games like Skyrim and Fallout so dearly. So, you can catch me live on Twitch, probably playing more Starfield, but also Star Citizen and other games I know you'll like. I also have a second YouTube channel, Detox's Lab, which is linked below, where I introduce you to other unique and awesome video games. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye, fellow meatbags.